Hey guys, welcome to Relationship Stories with TaleTime. The first story is titled, Abusive Family Kicked Me Out of the House on My Birthday and Left Me Homeless. The story starts like this. Growing up, I always knew my family was different. While other kids were excited about birthdays and celebrations, I dreaded mine. It wasn't because I didn't like getting older or the attention, it was because my family made every event a nightmare. My parents were the kind of people who thrived on chaos and conflict, and my siblings followed suit. Every family gathering devolved into screaming matches, insults, and sometimes even physical violence. As my 18th birthday approached, I couldn't help but feel a sense of impending doom. I had been counting down the days until I could legally leave this toxic household, but I knew my family wouldn't make it easy. They had a way of sucking me back in, making me feel guilty for wanting to escape the only life I'd ever known. In the weeks leading up to my birthday, the tension in the house was palpable. My parents were arguing more than usual, and my siblings were taking sides. I tried to stay out of it, focusing on my studies and saving every penny I could for my part-time job. I had dreams of going to college, getting a degree, and starting a new life far away from this madness. Little did I know that my birthday would be the catalyst for a chain of events that would change my life forever. I had no idea that the day I had been dreading would turn out to be the day that set me free, but not in the way I had ever imagined. Looking back, I can see all the signs that something was about to go horribly wrong. My mother had been giving me the silent treatment for days, and my father had been drinking more than usual. My siblings were whispering behind my back, and I caught them giving me strange looks when they thought I wasn't looking. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was just the usual family drama. I had survived 18 years of this. I could survive one more day. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight on the eve of my birthday, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine what my life would be like once I was free. I pictured myself in a cozy apartment, surrounded by books and plants, with a cat curled up on my lap. I imagined having friends who actually cared about me, who would celebrate my birthdays with me and make me feel loved and appreciated. As I drifted off to sleep, I held on to those dreams like a lifeline. Little did I know that the next day would shatter those dreams into a million pieces, leaving me broken and alone in a world that seemed determined to crush me. But even in my darkest moments, I never lost sight of those dreams. They were the only thing that kept me going when everything else seemed hopeless. And as I lay there on the eve of my 18th birthday, I made a promise to myself that no matter what happened, I would never give up on those dreams. I would fight for them with every ounce of strength I had, even if it meant leaving behind everything I had ever known. The morning of my 18th birthday started like any other day. I woke up to the sound of my parents arguing in the kitchen, their voices rising and falling like the tide. I lay in bed for a few minutes, trying to gather the strength to face whatever lay ahead. As I made my way downstairs, I couldn't help but notice the eerie silence that greeted me. Usually, my siblings would be fighting over the cereal or bickering about who got to use the bathroom first. But today, they were nowhere to be seen. I walked into the kitchen, where my parents were sitting at the table, their faces grim. My mother looked up at me, her eyes cold and hard. "Happy birthday," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I mumbled a thank you and reached for a bowl, but my father slammed his hand down on the table, making me jump. "Not so fast," he growled. "We need to talk." I felt my stomach sink. Nothing good ever came from those words. I sat down at the table, my hands trembling slightly. "We've been thinking," my mother began, her voice falsely sweet. "You're 18 now, and it's time for you to start pulling your weight around here." I nodded, not sure where this was going. I had been working part-time at a local grocery store for months, trying to save up for college. I thought they would be happy that I was taking responsibility for my future. But my father had other ideas. "We think it's time for you to start paying rent," he said, his eyes boring into mine. "And not just a little bit? We're talking half your paycheck." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Half my paycheck? That was practically all the money I had been saving for college. I opened my mouth to protest, but my mother cut me off. "And that's not all," she said, her voice rising. "We also expect you to start doing more around the house. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, all of it. It's time for you to start acting like an adult." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been doing chores around the house for as long as I could remember, often picking up the slack for my siblings. But now they wanted me to be their full-time maid, on top of paying rent? I tried to reason with them, explaining that I needed the money for college and that I already had a heavy workload with school and my job. But they wouldn't listen. My father slammed his fist on the table again, his face turning red. "You ungrateful little brat," he spat. "We've given you everything, and this is how you repay us? By whining about having to do your fair share?" I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I knew that crying would only make things worse. I tried to keep my voice steady as I spoke. "I'm not ungrateful," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I just don't think it's fair to ask me to give up my entire paycheck and all my free time. I have dreams and goals too." My mother laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Dreams and goals?" she sneered. "You really think you're going to make something of yourself? You're nothing special, just a burden on this family." I felt like I had been slapped. I had always known that my family didn't support my dreams, but hearing it so bluntly was like a knife to the heart. I stood up, my legs shaking. "I'm not a burden," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "and I'm not going to let you treat me like one anymore." My father stood up, his face contorted with rage. "If you don't like it, then get out," he roared. "Pack your bags and leave. We don't need you here." I felt like the world was spinning. Leave? Leave? Where would I go? I had no money, no friends, no support system. But as I looked at the hatred and disgust on my family's faces, I knew that staying was no longer an option. I turned and ran up the stairs, my vision blurred with tears. I grabbed a backpack and started throwing in clothes and essentials, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely zip it up. I could hear my parents yelling at each other downstairs, their voices growing louder and more vicious. As I made my way back downstairs, my siblings finally emerged from their rooms. They watched me with a mix of pity and contempt as I walked towards the front door, my backpack slung over my shoulder. "Don't bother coming back," my mother called after me, her voice cold and unfeeling. "You're not welcome here anymore." I stepped out into the bright sunlight, blinking back tears. I had no idea where I was going to go or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I was alone, with nothing but a backpack and a shattered heart. As I walked down the street, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was homeless, with no money, no job, and no one to turn to. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, threatening to drown me in its depths. But even in that moment of hopelessness, I knew that I had made the right decision. I had taken a stand against the abuse and toxicity that had defined my life for too long. I had chosen my own path, even if that path was uncertain and scary. And so, with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I set off into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I didn't know it then, but that moment of courage and defiance would be the first step on a long and difficult journey towards a better life. The first few days of homelessness were a blur. I wandered the streets aimlessly, trying to find a safe place to sleep and something to eat. I quickly realized that the world was a much harsher place than I had ever imagined. At first, I tried to find shelter in public places like parks and libraries, but I soon discovered that these places were often patrolled by security guards who were quick to kick out anyone who looked like they didn't belong. I learned to sleep with one eye open, always ready to move on at a moment's notice. Food was another constant struggle. I had never realized how expensive even the most basic necessities could be. I tried to stretch what little money I had as far as it would go, buying cheap fast food and snacks from convenience stores. But my funds quickly ran out, and I found myself digging through dumpsters and begging for spare change on street corners. The hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at my stomach and making it hard to think straight. I lost weight rapidly, my clothes hanging loosely off my increasingly skeletal frame. I knew that I needed to find a more sustainable way to feed myself, but I had no idea where to start. As the days turned into weeks, the loneliness began to take its toll. I had always been a bit of a loner, but being completely cut off from any human contact was a different kind of isolation altogether. I longed for someone to talk to, someone to share my struggles with, but most of the people I encountered on the streets were too wrapped up in their own problems to pay me any attention. There were a few kind souls who took pity on me, offering me a sandwich or a few dollars. I was always grateful for their generosity, but I hated the feeling of being a charity case. I wanted to be able to take care of myself, to prove that I was more than just a homeless kid. But for every kind stranger, there were many more who were cruel and dismissive. I lost count of the number of times I was yelled at, spat on, or chased away from a promising spot to sleep. I learned to keep my head down and my guard up, never knowing when the next attack would come. One particularly cold and rainy night, I hit my lowest point. I hadn't eaten in days, and I was shivering uncontrollably from the damp and the chill. I had taken shelter in an abandoned building, but the roof was leaking and the floor was covered in broken glass and debris. As I lay there, curled up in a ball and trying to conserve what little body heat I had left, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I couldn't see any way out of this nightmare. I had no job, no prospects, and no one to turn to. I felt like I was destined to die on the streets, just another nameless statistic. But something inside me refused to give up. Maybe it was the stubborn streak that had always gotten me into trouble, or maybe it was the memory of the dreams I had once had for myself. Whatever it was, I knew that I couldn't let this be the end of my story. I forced myself to sit up, wincing at the pain in my stiff and aching muscles. I looked around at the squalor and decay that surrounded me, and I made a decision. I was going to find a way out of this, no matter what it took. I started by trying to find odd jobs around the neighborhood. I offered to mow lawns, walk dogs, or do any other small tasks that people needed. At first, it was slow going. Most people were wary of hiring a homeless kid, and I had to work twice as hard to prove that I was reliable and trustworthy. But gradually, I started to build up a small clientele. I saved every penny I earned, scrimping and saving until I had enough to buy a cheap prepaid phone and some basic toiletries. I used the phone to start applying for entry-level jobs, anything that would give me a steady paycheck and a chance to get back on my feet. It wasn't easy. I faced rejection after rejection, and there were many days when I wanted to give up. But I kept pushing forward, fueled by a newfound determination to take control of my life. Finally, After months of struggle, I landed a job as a dishwasher at a local restaurant. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I worked long hours for minimum wage, but I was grateful for the opportunity to earn an honest living. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my life. I saved up enough money to rent a small room in a boarding house where I could finally have a roof over my head and a place to call my own. I enrolled in night classes at a community college, determined to get the education I had always dreamed of. It wasn't a smooth or easy journey. There were many setbacks and obstacles along the way, and there were times when I doubted whether I had what it took to make it. But I refused to give up on myself, no matter how hard things got. Looking back on those dark days on the streets, I realize now that they were a turning point in my life. They taught me the value of resilience, perseverance, and self-reliance. They showed me that I was stronger than I ever knew, and that I had the power to shape my own destiny. I still carry the scars of those experiences with me, both physical and emotional. But I also carry the knowledge that I am a survivor, and that I can overcome anything that life throws my way. And that is a gift that no one can ever take away from me. With a renewed sense of purpose and determination, I set out to build a better life for myself. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to do whatever it took to escape the cycle of poverty and despair that had trapped me for so long. My first step was to find a more stable job. While working as a dishwasher had been a lifeline, I knew that I needed something with better pay and more opportunities for advancement. I scoured job listings and asked around my neighborhood, finally landing a position as a sales associate at a local department store. It wasn't my dream job by any means, but it was a step up. I worked hard, putting in long hours and always going above and beyond what was expected of me. I quickly earned a reputation as a reliable and hard-working employee, and I started to get noticed by my managers. At the same time, I was also pursuing my education. I had always been a good student, but my tumultuous home life had made it difficult for me to focus on my studies. Now, with a stable place to live and a steady income, I was able to enroll in classes at my local community college. I started with just a few courses, balancing my studies with my work schedule. It was challenging, and there were many late nights and early mornings as I tried to keep up with my coursework. But I was determined to succeed, and I refused to let anything stand in my way. As I progressed in my classes, I discovered a passion for business and entrepreneurship. I had always been fascinated by the idea of starting my own company, and I began to dream of one day being my own boss. I knew that I had a long way to go, but I was excited by the possibilities that lay ahead. I also started to network and build relationships with people who could help me achieve my goals. I joined student organizations and attended industry events, always looking for opportunities to learn and grow. I met mentors who took me under their wing, offering guidance and support as I navigated the complex world of business. Gradually, I started to see the pieces of my life falling into place. I was promoted to a management position at the department store, which came with a significant pay raise and more responsibility. I used the extra money to pay off my debts and start saving for the future. I also started to explore entrepreneurial opportunities on the side. I launched a small e-commerce business, selling products that I had sourced from local artisans. It was a lot of work, but I was passionate about what I was doing, and I believed in the potential of my business. As my business grew, I started to attract the attention of investors and industry leaders. I was invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing my story and my vision for the future. I felt like I was finally making a name for myself, and I was proud of how far I had come. But success didn't come without its challenges. There were many times when I doubted myself and my abilities, wondering if I had what it took to make it in the competitive world of business. I faced setbacks and failures, and there were days when I wanted to give up and go back to my old life. But I refused to let those moments define me. I learned from my mistakes and used them as opportunities to grow and improve. I surrounded myself with positive influences and people who believed in me, and I drew strength from their support. I also had to make sacrifices along the way. I missed out on social events and time with friends, choosing instead to focus on my studies and my business. I lived frugally, putting every spare penny into my savings and investments. It wasn't always easy, but I knew that the short-term sacrifices would pay off in the long run. As the years went by, my hard work started to pay off. My e-commerce business took off, and I was able to quit my job at the department store to focus on it full-time. I graduated from community college with honors, and I was accepted into a prestigious business school to pursue my master's degree. I also started to give back to my community, using my success to help others who were struggling. I volunteered at local homeless shelters and youth programs, sharing my story and offering guidance to those who needed it most. I knew firsthand how difficult it could be to break free from the cycle of poverty, and I was determined to do my part to make a difference. Looking back on my journey, I am amazed at how far I have come. From a homeless teenager with no prospects, to a successful entrepreneur and community leader, I have defied the odds and created a life that I am proud of. But I know that my journey is far from over. I still have big dreams and ambitions, and I'm constantly pushing myself to learn and grow. I know that there will be more challenges and obstacles ahead, but I am ready to face them head on. Because if there's one thing that my experience has taught me, it's that success isn't about where you start, but where you end up. Years had passed since I last had any contact with my family. After they kicked me out on my 18th birthday, I had no desire to reconnect with them. I focused on building my own life, pursuing my dreams, and creating a future that I could be proud of. But one day, out of the blue, I received a phone call from my mother. At first, I was tempted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, bracing myself for the worst. "Hello? Hello?" I said, my voice cautious. "Hi, sweetie," my mother replied, her tone sugary sweet. "It's been so long. How are you?" I was taken aback by her friendly demeanor. This was not the same woman who had coldly told me to leave and never come back. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of suspicion. "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What do you want?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, your father and I have been thinking about you a lot lately. We've had time to reflect on the past, and we realized that we made some mistakes. We want to make things right." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that maybe they had truly changed, but another part of me couldn't forget the years of abuse and neglect that I had suffered at their hands. "I appreciate that," I said, choosing my words carefully, "but I'm not sure if I'm ready to reconnect just yet. I've built a life for myself, and I'm happy with where I am." "We understand," my mother said, her voice taking on a pleading tone, "but we were hoping that maybe you could help us out a little. Your father has been having some health problems, and we're struggling to make ends meet. We thought that maybe you could lend us some money, just until we get back on our feet." I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. So that was the real reason for their sudden interest in reconnecting. They needed money, and they thought that I would be an easy target. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health problems," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm not in a position to lend you money right now. I have my own expenses to worry about." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When my mother spoke again, her voice had taken on a harder edge. "I can't believe you," she said, her words dripping with venom. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? We gave you a roof over your head and food on the table, and now you can't even spare a little money to help your own family?" I felt a surge of anger coursing through my veins. How dare she try to guilt me into giving them money, after everything they had put me through? "You kicked me out on my birthday," I reminded her, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You told me that I was a burden, that you didn't want me anymore. I had to fend for myself on the streets, with no money and nowhere to go. And now you have the nerve to ask me for financial help? That was a long time ago," my mother replied, her tone dismissive. "We've changed. Can't you see that? We're trying to make amends, but you're too stubborn to let go of the past." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They hadn't changed at all. They were still the same manipulative, toxic people that they had always been. They only wanted me back in their lives because they thought that I could be of use to them. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice firm, "but I can't help you. I have to protect myself and my own well-being. I hope that Dad gets better soon, but I can't be a part of your lives anymore." With that, I hung up the phone, my heart racing in my chest. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. I had finally stood up to my family, after years of being under their thumb. But I also couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that my mother's words had stirred up. Despite everything they had done to me, they were still my family. A part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should give them another chance. I sat down on my couch, my head in my hands. I knew that I had made the right decision, but that didn't make it any easier. I had spent so many years trying to escape my past, to build a life that was free from the toxicity of my family. And now, just when I thought I had finally achieved that, they had come crashing back into my life. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I knew that I needed to be strong, to remember all the reasons why I had cut ties with my family in the first place. I couldn't let them manipulate me or guilt me into giving them what they wanted. But I also knew that the decision to turn my back on them would come with its own set of challenges. I would have to live with the knowledge that I had rejected my own flesh and blood, that I had chosen my own well-being over the needs of my family. It was a heavy burden to bear, but one that I knew I had to carry. I had worked too hard and come too far to let my family drag me back down into the darkness. I had to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. And so, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, I resolved to stay true to myself and my own values. I would not let my family's toxic influence back into my life, no matter how much they might try to guilt or manipulate me. I had fought too hard for my own happiness and success to let them take that away from me now. In the days that followed my mother's phone call, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I knew that I had made the right decision in refusing to give them money, but a part of me still felt guilty for turning my back on them. I decided that I needed to confront them in person, to tell them once and for all that I was not going to be a part of their manipulative games anymore. I knew that it would be difficult, but I also knew that it was necessary for my own mental health and well-being. I arranged to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the center of town. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for them to arrive. When they finally walked in, I barely recognized them. My father looked frail and sickly, his once robust frame now thin and gaunt. My mother's face was lined with wrinkles, her hair graying at the temples. They sat down across from me, their expressions wary. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," my mother said, her voice hesitant. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "I didn't come here to make small talk," I said, my voice firm. I came here to tell you that I'm not going to be a part of your lives anymore." My father's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I mean that I'm not going to let you manipulate me or guilt me into giving you money," I said, my voice rising with each word. "I'm not going to let you back into my life just so you can use me for your own gain." My mother's face twisted with anger. "How dare you accuse us of such things?" she spat. "We're your family. We love you." I laughed bitterly. "Love? Is that what you call it? Kicking me out on the streets with nothing? Telling me that I was a burden and a failure? That's not love. That's abuse." My father's face flushed with shame. "We made mistakes," he said, his voice trembling. "But we've changed. Can't you see that?" I shook my head. "No, you haven't changed. You're still the same toxic, manipulative people that you always were. The only reason you want me back in your life is because you think that I can be of use to you." My mother's eyes flashed with anger. "That's not true," she said, her voice rising. "We just want to be a family again, to make amends for the past." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Then why did you only reach out to me when you needed money?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. "Why didn't you try to make amends years ago, when I was struggling to survive on the streets?" My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. My father looked down at the table, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I've built a life for myself," I said, my voice filled with pride. "I've worked hard to get where I am today, and I'm not going to let you take that away from me. I'm happy with who I am and what I've achieved, and I don't need your approval or your love to validate that." Tears welled up in my mother's eyes. "But we're your family," she whispered, her voice breaking. I shook my head. "Family is about more than blood," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's about love, respect, and support. It's about being there for each other through the good times and the bad. And you have never been that for me." I stood up, my heart heavy but my head held high. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice filled with genuine regret, "but I can't be a part of your lives anymore. I have to protect myself and my own well-being." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving my family sitting stunned and silent behind me. As I stepped out into the bright sunlight, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had finally stood up to my family, had finally told them the truth about how their actions had affected me. I had set clear boundaries and refused to let them manipulate me anymore. And in doing so, I had realized just how far I had come. I had built a life for myself that I could be proud of, had achieved success and happiness on my own terms. I had proven to myself that I was capable of overcoming even the darkest of circumstances, of rising above the pain and trauma of my past. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. I would always carry the scars of my family's abuse and neglect, would always feel the weight of their actions on my heart. Update to the story. It's been a few years since I confronted my family at that coffee shop and walked away for good. I won't lie, it wasn't easy at first. Cutting off toxic people, even if they're family, leaves a hole that takes time to fill. But I knew I had to prioritize my own well-being. In the immediate aftermath, they tried to reach out a few more times. More guilt-tripping voicemails, a couple letters begging for another chance. I stayed firm in my resolve though. I didn't engage, just deleted and tossed it all out. Eventually they got the message that I was serious about not letting them back in my life. Meanwhile, I focused on surrounding myself with positive influences and living life on my own terms. I got involved with some local volunteer organizations and made new friends who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. I continued to work hard at my business and it really thrived. Within a year, I had expanded to 2 new cities and doubled my staff. On the personal front, I started dating an amazing woman named Jenna. We took things slow, but she showed me what a healthy, supportive relationship could look like. For the first time, I understood what real, unconditional love felt like. We got married last spring in a small ceremony with close friends. It was perfect. Last I heard through the grapevine, my parents' health and financial situation had gotten worse. Part of me felt a small pang of guilt, but I quickly reminded myself that I was not responsible for their well-being, especially after how they treated me growing up and as an adult. It was a hard truth, but a necessary one. I've come to accept that I'll probably never have the kind of family bonds you see in holiday cards and sappy commercials. For a long time I had resentment about that, but I've made peace with it. Family is what you make of it, and I've built a damn good one with Jenna, our friends, and our dog Rufus. In a strange way, I'm grateful for the adversity I faced. Without it, I wouldn't have the strength, resilience, and perspective I do now. I wouldn't appreciate the good people and things in my life as much. I'm proud of the cycles I've broken and the man I've become, despite the odds stacked against me. To anyone out there facing a similar toxic family dynamic, know this: you have the power to write your own story. Don't let their dysfunction dictate your worth or limit your potential. Surround yourself with people who value and support you. Focus on your own growth and goals. It won't be easy, but I promise you, it's so worth it. As for me, I'm excited for the next chapters. Jenna and I are expecting our first child soon. I know I'll make mistakes as a parent, but I also know I will love and support my kid unconditionally, give them the emotional safety and stability I never had. And when they're old enough, I'll share my story with them, as a testament to the power of perseverance and choosing your own path. So that's where I'm at now. Stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I ever could have imagined during those dark days on the streets. To anyone who's been following this wild journey, thanks for listening. I hope sharing my story helps even one person out there feel less alone. Time to sign off now. The dog needs a walk, and Jenna has a sudden craving for pickles and peanut butter. Duty calls, onward and upward. And guys, I found an interesting comment that described personal experiences that I want to share with you. I can relate to your experience more than I'd like to admit. While my family wasn't quite as overtly abusive as yours, the emotional manipulation and constant belittling was definitely there. I remember being told I was too sensitive whenever I got upset at my parents' cruel jokes about my weight or interests. They always made me feel like I was the problem for not being able to take it. It all came to a head when I was in my early 20s and struggling with depression. Instead of being supportive, my mom told me I was being dramatic and just needed to snap out of it. That was the moment I realized I needed to distance myself from their toxicity if I ever wanted to heal and grow. I started setting boundaries, which they pushed back against hard at first. Lots of guilt tripping and gaslighting. But I held firm, even when it meant skipping family events or hanging up the phone when they started in on me. It was really tough at first, but over time, it got easier. I focused on surrounding myself with positive people who built me up instead of tearing me down. I got into therapy, which helped me work through a lot of the damage my upbringing had done. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my self-esteem and find my own sense of worth separate from their opinions. It's been a few years now since I really limited contact with my immediate family. Like you, I still feel twinges of guilt sometimes, especially around the holidays. But ultimately, I know I made the right choice for my mental health and overall well-being. I'm happier and healthier than I've ever been. Your point about building your own family really resonated with me too. I found my chosen family and my close friends and partner. They've shown me what unconditional love and support really looks like. I actually teared up reading about your wedding and baby on the way. You've broken the cycle and are creating the kind of loving, nurturing family environment you deserved all along. Your kid is so lucky to have you as a dad. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it couldn't have been easy to be so vulnerable, but I promise you it makes a difference. Posts like these remind people struggling that they aren't alone and that there is hope, even in the darkest of times. It also helps chip away at the stigma and shame around cutting off toxic family, which is so important. For a long time, I struggled with feeling like something was wrong with me for not being able to make it work. Reading stories like yours reminds me that it's okay to choose yourself and your own well-being. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoy my content, please like the video, comment with some clock emojis to show your support, and subscribe if you have not done so already. Thanks a lot, and I will see you again tomorrow.